my name is Tom Lavola. I'm professor of competition law at the University of Tokyo, and I want to give some tips on how to improve your presentation skills in English. Presentation skills are important. They're important in academia, they're important everywhere in daily life, in any career. Essentially, there's only two ways to share our research, right? In writing or orally. Probably writing is even more important. And if you have a good article and you've got it published as an academic, probably that's really the most important. But at least in my experience, to get there, to get to this good article, you need to present it, because presenting it is really the first step towards a great article. You get feedback, you get comments, you get criticism, you can improve your article, and that gets you a great article that will get published. Also, if you want to continue your career in academia, you're going to have to teach. And for teaching, you need presentation skills. If you do a career outside of academia, you'll also need presentation skills. I have a lot of friends in companies who say, I have these great ideas, but my colleague gets all the credit for it. Because my colleague presents and my colleague is really good in meetings at explaining. And so everyone thinks he is the one who has all the good ideas. But in fact, it's me. So there's a lot of frustration if you're not good at presenting. Why is presenting in English important? Well, whether we like it or not, English is the common language used at international conferences. If we have international students, we need to teach them in English. Will that change in the future? Maybe. AI is getting better and better. Automated translation is getting better and better. This is just part of Microsoft PowerPoint, this automated translation function. If you want, I can show you later. It's just you click one button and you have these subtitles. They're pretty good, but they change all the time, because as my sentence changes, the translation also changes. So I guess I have to speak really slowly. And then the translations and the subtitles make some sense. But let me put them off, because they're more a distraction than anything else. For my students, my Japanese students, I put the English subtitles on. And they're pretty good. Because there, the sentence doesn't change. It just gives what I say. And for certain words, like, incongruous or something, people are like, what? They don't understand it orally, but if they see it on the slide in English, then they understand it. So that's a helpful function. Now, presenting is important, but we're all, including myself, we all dread it. We all fear it. There's a lot of surveys on this, and they show that people fear public speaking about as much or more than snakes or poisonous spiders or heights or all kinds of things. There's this famous comedian, a US comedian, and he has this very famous line. So he saw these surveys, and the number one fear is public speaking, and the number two is death. So people fear public speaking more than death. And then he said, well, that means to the average person, if you have to be at a funeral, you would rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy. You would be rather dead in the box than having to speak about the person who's dead. So we all fear it, but maybe with these tips and by practicing, we'll have a second part today where I hope we can practice, it gets better, and it does get better. I still, I think it's still difficult. It's still, especially when I have to speak in a language I'm not comfortable in, like Japanese, but it gets better with time. So don't worry if you don't like it or you fear it, it does get better over time. But the only way it gets better is by practicing and trying. Now, before you say, Professor, that's easy for you to say, you're almost native or something. Well, let me explain a little bit about my own background, because I think there's two counter arguments to that. The point that, oh, it's easy for you. First of all, English is not my native language. It's not even the second language I learned. I'm from Belgium. It's a small country between France, the Netherlands, and Germany. Although it's small, there's quite a lot of languages spoken there. There's 3 official languages: Dutch, French, German. The yellow part is where Dutch is spoken. And I was born in the yellow part. So I went to school in Dutch. My university education, law school, was in Dutch. And my second language was French, because in school, at around 6 or 7 years age, we learned French. English was the third language I was taught, and I was about 12 years old when I had my first English class in high school. 2 hours per week, so much less than Japanese students. But still, probably it would be a lie to say that 英語が苦手な人, that I'm, someone who doesn't like or who has no affinity for English. It's true, I've always loved English, and it's not through school that I learned it. I learned it through movies, through TV, through music. I was lucky to have parents who had a lot of friends from abroad, and when they came, they spoke English. Traveling made me speak in English. When I grew up, the internet was starting up, and we called it the internet. It was just like one thing, the internet. And I remember going on a chat box. That was something new. Like you could chat with someone from America. And we were like, wow. And that was the way for me to practice English and writing and chatting, using the internet, books as well. So I guess I learned English more in a natural way rather than really through school. But how about Japanese? I think my struggle with Japanese is probably very similar to the struggle many Japanese students face with English. It doesn't come as naturally, because English comes naturally to me because my native tongue is Dutch, and they're part of the same family. It's called the West Germanic language family. It has German, Dutch, English. They're all related. They're family of languages. Japanese is a totally different thing. And so I spent a lot of time trying to study Japanese. I started in high school. I lived half a year in Japan, in Kyoto, in high school. And that was the first time I studied some Japanese. And it went pretty quick. But still, I mean, okay, yeah, hiragana, katakana, some kanji, and some basic conversation. It's not like that makes you fluent, right? So even a semester in high school, it's nothing. And then many years after that, while I did my LLM in Japan, while I did my PhD in Japan, I studied Japanese on the side. And I still think my Japanese is not fluent, not really. I don't think I can be a great speaker in Japanese. I think to be a great speaker in Japanese, if you're from Europe or from the US, the only way is either at a really young age, spend 3 or 4 years in Japan, or when you're in university, focus on Japanese language. So in other words, don't study law, but study Japanese language. Those are the people who speak really fluent Japanese. If, like me, you study law, and on the side, after your law classes, you study some Japanese, you get to my level, which is kind of okay, I guess, but it's not really gonna make me a great speaker. And I think a lot of my Japanese students face the same problem. They're very smart, and they have talent for language, but the distance between Japanese and English is just so big that they have to put so much time to reach a good level. And they reach a good level, but to really reach this kind of total natural fluency, it's extremely difficult. But that's okay, right? I mean, our language is a tool to share our research. We don't need to be stars, and we don't need to be the best speaker at the conference. We need to be able to share our ideas and our research, and that's enough. So that's how I comfort myself when I struggle with my Japanese and I have to prepare a presentation in Japanese. I'm always very nervous, but at least my idea somehow is conveyed, is transmitted, and that's the ultimate goal. So, all right, some tips. The first 3 minutes of your presentation are the most important. That's when the audience looking at you kind of decides what they're gonna do the rest of the presentation. Whether they're gonna check their email or their Facebooks and kind of listen with a half ear, or whether they're really gonna focus on what you say. So whenever you prepare your presentation, make sure you think well about those first 3 minutes. What are you gonna say in those first 3 minutes? And personally, I don't like very much presentations that start, my name is Van der Wallen, and I'm going to talk about competition law and big tech. and how we can assess whether competition law has adequately dealt with big tech. I don't think that's a good intro. That's not a good start. I think if you give that start, a lot of the audiences, okay, and they check their email, or they're not really interested anymore. You have to capture the audience from the beginning. That's when the whole audience is still attentive and awake. The first few minutes. After that, they get a bit sleepy. Even if your talk is interesting, they'll get a bit sleepy. So your impression and what people remember from your presentation will be most determined by those first 3 minutes. So rather than saying what I just said, I would try to put it in this way. For instance, put it as a question. Has competition law dealt, how has competition law dealt with big tech? And has it done enough? That's the topic of my presentation today. So I just said the same thing, but I said it in a question. And to me, it's more engaging because the audience is like, ah, yeah, okay, interesting question. I also wonder, and they will listen more. Another way is an anecdote or a story. A lot of people will tell you storytelling is important. Humans love stories. Humans don't like bullet points. As a kid, we love stories and we still love stories. So if you can start with a story, that's great. Not always possible, I find. Certainly in law, where we have sometimes very technical things to present, it's not always possible to start with a story, but it's very successful if you can do it. This is all the great tech presentation, 30% start with a story. But it's not always easy. Maybe for this one, I woke up, I checked my messages, Apple. Someone rang my doorbell, Amazon. I came to campus, checked my mail, Microsoft, and then I had a meeting with the dean, Apple. So from this morning until now, I've spent most of my time using the services of big tech. These companies have huge power in our daily life. Maybe that would be a story, right? So that would also be a way to start the presentation. A statement or a surprising fact that can also work. On average, we spend more than 5 hours per day using the services of big tech. Like if you start with that as first sentence, that can kind of catch people. Or, what will the audience get from this presentation? That's also, of course, a very good way to start the presentation. That's my first tip.